Hello, so today's video is going to be a collective perfume haul. I'm going to talk about every fragrance that has come into my life over the past 6 months. So some of these fragrances I have bought, some I've been gifted in PR, and others I have won in giveaways. So I'm just going to go through each one and give you my updated thoughts on these fragrances, whether they're staying, whether they've already gone, and whether they are things that I truly love. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire. I talk all about fragrance on this channel. I talk about perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology, and I also just love doing perfume reviews and fun perfume tags. So if that kind of thing interests you and you haven't already done so, then please do consider subscribing, and please also press the like button if you do enjoy this kind of content. So let's go back to January 2026, which is the first fragrance that came into my life this year. So the first fragrance is ironically one that I no longer own. This was a fragrance that I had an instant dislike to, and I don't really know whether I'm misjudging the entire brand by judging it based on this one fragrance, but it's kind of put me off trying other fragrances from this brand. So I won this one in an Instagram giveaway in the run up to Christmas, and it's from the brand Perroy. It's called AzureBlush. So AzureBlush, I think, is considered by many people to be a dupe of Delina. It does have very similar notes, but I would say actually to me they're quite different fragrances. This to me is much greener and it's got a lot more woodiness about it. And it also is quite a synthetic smelling fragrance. It doesn't smell like something really in nature. So you get a lot of the rhubarb and you also get some of the lychee, but it's the woodiness and the greenness that I really didn't enjoy in this fragrance. But the worst part of this was the dry down. So even the next day, I kept smelling something that smelled like washing up liquid, and I honestly thought I'd spilt some on my clothes. And then I realised that the smell was actually emanating from where I'd sprayed this fragrance the day before. So this was an instant declutter. I think I put it in my declutter video back in January. So that's Perroy's AzureBlush. So the next three fragrances I bought in a gift set in TK Maxx. I saw these in the sale section and I just felt intrigued enough to try these out. They're just 10ml bottles, and there were 3 in this set. So Le Jasmin, Citron, and Craft and Glamour. So Le Jasmin, first of all, is a fragrance that I've ended up putting on my monthly tray. I do really enjoy it. It's basically a citrusy jasmine fragrance. It's definitely more citrus than jasmine. I think the name is a bit misleading. So this is really a very soft feeling lemony orange fragrance overall. But initially it's a green, soft feeling herbal lemon. There's lavender, there's oak moss, and there's also orange, softening the feel of the lemon. This fragrance does have a bit of a solar feel. It's quite bright feeling, and it's also got some orange blossom. It's got a kind of golden feel overall. It's really only in the dry down that you sense an airy jasmine and some musk. It's not a heavy fragrance, this one. It's quite light and airy, and I do quite like this one. So that's Le Jasmin. So the second fragrance, Citron, is again a citrus-based fragrance, but this definitely has a more green aspect to it. It's quite a fresh greenness originally, so there's basil and there's mint. And then as it dries down, it goes woodier, and it also becomes slightly spiced. So the thing that really stands out to me as it dries down is the thyme. It does have an overall herbal feel to this, but the citrus stops this from being, like a barbershop fragrance. It's not like that at all. It's something that definitely does have a freshness to it. It actually makes me think of Acqua di Parma fragrances, something quite Mediterranean feeling, quite summery, but quite fresh. It's got a really clean and cool feel to it. I think this is a really different and unusual choice for me, but I do think that I will reach for this one more when it's really hot because it is so cool and refreshing. So that's Citron. The third fragrance in this little set was a really big surprise. So the third one is called Craft and Glamour, and I didn't really know what to expect of this one from the name, but actually this really reminded me of a gentle kind of toned down version of something like Halfeti. So this opens with a sweet, jammy style rose, which is quickly morphed into a booziness and a kind of polished wood feel. I guess the booziness here is the plum, and the polished wood is probably the patchouli. This also has a bit of a spicy feel and also a leatheriness to it. And I would say this is definitely on the softer side of leatheriness. It's not as extreme as Halfeti. I find the leather in Halfeti to be quite green sometimes, and on my skin that's kind of amplified, and that's a reason why I like smelling Halfetti on other people but perhaps not as much on myself. I think Craft and Glamour perhaps suits me a little bit better, and I think this fragrance is one that I will reach for when it gets cold again. I think this is quite a nice wintry feeling fragrance. So that's Craft and Glamour. So the next fragrance is one that was gifted in PR, and I remember when I first got this, before I tried it I thought, oh, I'm really not going to like this, and I ended up really enjoying it. So this one is Power of You by Armani. So this is really a fragrance that makes me think of my youth in the 2000s, going out. It makes me think of Reef Alcopops, and that's just incredibly nostalgic and makes me think of a really fun time in my life. And it's the stickiness, it's the fruitiness, it's the sweetness and the slight booziness of this fragrance that takes me back to those nights out in the 2000s. So this in reality is a passion fruit fragrance. It's something that has the sweeter aspect of passion fruit without the bitterness, but it really is a lovely interpretation of passion fruit. There's also quite a burnished golden vanilla here. It's something that makes me think of the vanilla that's in Vanilla 28. It's that kind of vanilla. It's quite a rich feeling vanilla. I just really like this one. I think it's a really fun fragrance. It's not something super sophisticated. It's something that just screams fun. And I think this has been one of the best designer releases this year. I realise this one's controversial because I hear people saying that they get BO with this fragrance. I know we all smell things differently. I just can't imagine how people can smell BO with this one. But clearly it's a thing. So yeah, that's Armani's Power of You. So the next fragrance was a birthday gift from me to me. I had been wanting this fragrance for literally years. It's something that I have loved from the very moment I tried it, and I actually sampled another fragrance with similar notes to this one in the same range just to make sure that this one was the one for me, and it was. So that other fragrance was Amouage's Sunshine, and I realised that this one was my one true love. So this is Amouage's Portrayal. This fragrance is just the most gorgeous jasmine fragrance. It does have that slight menthol aspect that jasmine can give, and it also has a bit of tuberose. Also, as this dries down, you get a lovely creaminess, you get the tobacco, which is very gentle and subtle, but just adds so much interest to this fragrance. And you also get those sort of signature Amouage resins. The dry down is the joy for me with this one. I love the opening, but I just love the dry down, and it's something that is incredibly long lasting. I think this one has always been my dream Amouage fragrance, and I'm not someone who wants to collect like crazy amounts of Amouage fragrances. They're incredibly expensive perfumes, but I think, just owning like one or two, that's enough for me. So that's Amouage's Portrayal. So the next fragrance is one from Estée Lauder, and I picked this one up secondhand, and it's Estée Lauder's Sensuous. So I used to own Sensuous Nude, and I pretty much instantly decluttered that one. There was no lasting power, and also I didn't like the texture of that fragrance. There was something really off to me about that fragrance. This one is definitely the one of this line for me. So I bought a 2017 bottle of this fragrance because I thought it'd been reformulated and I didn't want something that I hadn't smelt before. But this 2017 bottle smells great to me. So this is a very clean, kind of almost body cream style fragrance. It actually makes me think of walking into a ritual shop. It's that kind of smell. But it's sandalwood really that I think comes through the most. There's also a very mild pepperiness, and there's also a bit of a sweetness here. I think it's honey in this fragrance, but it's not like a sticky sweet feel. It's just a little bit of an airy sweetness. I just find this one incredibly wearable. I love wearing this to work. It's just one of those fragrances that make me think of body products. It's just fresh, clean, light and airy. So that's Sensuous by Estée Lauder. So the next two fragrances I actually won in an Instagram giveaway, and these have both been decluttered. They have found happy new homes elsewhere. I did make a video reviewing these two fragrances, and I think I said in that video that I wasn't too impressed by them. So these are both celebrity fragrances by Kylie Minogue, and the first one is called Lover's Fleur. So Lover's Fleur is a creamy, solar, musky floral. It's a warm floral. And it's got a coconutty aspect to this, it's got tuberose, it's got ylang ylang, but it just is a kind of creamy, bright, light, airy floral. I think the problem with this one for me was that it felt incredibly safe. They hadn't done anything vaguely daring with this fragrance, and also it really reminded me of another fragrance that I used to own and kind of moved on from, which was Signorina Ribelle by Salvatore Ferragamo. I think, that type of fragrance I'm just not that into anymore, and I don't think I wanted something that wasn't as good as that fragrance in a new bottle. Also, the lasting power on Lover's Fleur, it was a skin scent within an hour and it'd gone completely from my skin within 2. So that's why that one went. Lover's Noir, I'm amazed that fragrance is not marketed solely towards men, because it just felt like something that was like a blue or green shower gel fragrance by the time it had dried down. So this is airy and bright again, and it's sweet and sparkly, but it's also very herbal. So it's got lavender and it's also got artemisia, and together, along with the other notes in this fragrance, it has a herbal, cool, woody feel. Really, the far dry down is all about cashmere, and it's a very dense feeling powderiness. I think this is much the more interesting fragrance, but still it was something that just wasn't me. So that one has also left my collection. So that's Lover's Noir. So the next fragrances that came into my life were gifted to me by Chloé. So they launched an entire new range of Mediterranean inspired fragrances called Les Essences Méditerranéennes from the Atelier des Fleurs line. And there were 4 fragrances in this line, and they sent me all 4. So I reviewed these in a video, and I have to say these really do reflect the Mediterranean. They're well done, they're really nicely inspired fragrances, but I think they're all quite airy, they're all quite light, and I think that might come as a shock to some people, especially if you're not familiar with the Atelier des Fleurs line, which are, in my experience, all quite light and airy fragrances in general. They feel like a very summery line to me. So the first one was Sous le Pain, and that one really is a very biche style fragrance. It does have his kind of signature woody aroma chemical dry down, but I would say it's very light and airy still, and it's not something that bothers me. Sometimes biche's fragrances can be a little bit too persistent, I guess is how I describe some of biche's fragrances. There's sort of something a little bit eternal about them, isn't there? And I guess that's what appeals to some people, but I just find sometimes it can be a little bit boring. But I actually thought this one was beautiful. It's something that really does make you think of being under pine trees. It actually made me think of when you're on a hot beach and you've been in the sun all day and you just walk up the beach into the cooler area of the pine trees and you feel the cold sand on your feet. It's that feeling of the cool silveriness being under the pine trees. It's just such an evocative fragrance, so Mediterranean feeling. I think it's really well done. So yeah, Sous le Pain, if you haven't tried it, definitely check that out, especially if you like things like Cedrus and if you like Beach's other creations. I think it's just slightly more gentle, slightly more easygoing, and it's something that could appeal to you even if you don't like Beach's other things, actually. So that's Sous le Pain. So also in this range, and one I really enjoy, is Sable Lavande. I haven't shown you the bottles before, so I thought I'd better hold one up, but I'm sure I've put a picture up for the last one. So this one I think is actually my favourite of the range, and I love it because of the creaminess. It's so unexpected to me because I was expecting something to be, really herbal, really strong smelling lavender fragrance, and that is not this fragrance. So it opens with a bit of citrus at the beginning, and then it's got a creamy aspect to it. So there's almond, and there's also something that makes me think of a roasted coconut in this fragrance. It's got a lovely creaminess, but also a lovely warm woodiness in the dry down. Whilst it's quite airy and light, I just think this one is really beautiful. So that's Sable Lavande. The next fragrance is Vert Soleil, and this one I think I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. This one I ended up wearing quite a bit, and that surprised me. So this is a very jewel-toned, citrusy fragrance to begin with. It's quite bright and solar feeling as well. And then there's also just this kind of texture to this fragrance as well. So there's a yellowy greenness to this fragrance, which is the mastic. And there's also a rosy aspect. So the rose is quite fresh feeling and it's quite smooth and petally. And then in the dry down, it's really a muskiness, a bit of a woodiness, but still with a bit of a citrus aspect to it as well. Just a really bright, clean, airy, sunshiny feeling fragrance. Very uplifting and very happy feeling. So that's Vert Soleil. And then the final fragrance is the one that I've probably worn the least. It's called Plage de Figuier. And Plage de Figuier is really a slightly aquatic fig fragrance. I'd say here it's much more about the greener aspects of fig than it is about the creamy aspects of fig. This also has a green citrusy aspect to it and also a bit of a warm woodiness too. The fragrance really does reflect the name here. It does make you think of being by the sea. It makes you think of being in the Mediterranean. It does have that kind of greener aspect as you might expect with fig. So yeah, that's Plage de Figuier. So the next fragrance is one that I bought, and this has been on my to try list for so long, and I finally picked it up. I kind of gave up on trying to find a sample and just blind bought a bottle of it. So this one is Kenzo Amour in this really strange looking bottle. But I do kind of like this bottle in a way. It makes me think of just a very architectural flower vase or something like that. It's a very odd style bottle anyway. So this is a vanilla fragrance really. It's a ricey vanilla fragrance. It's got a lot of texture to it. And it's very huggy and enveloping. And it's also just got this lovely fresh opening. So you get a lot of the cherry blossom and you also get a bit of an almondy aspect to this. It definitely has a creaminess but also a sweetness from that cherry blossom. It's very fresh feeling though in the opening. I think the heliotrope is not necessarily so strong, but it's something that definitely gives us a bit of a hugginess. Heliotrope can sometimes be really sweet and it's not here. Even though it does have sweeter aspects, I don't think this is a super sweet fragrance overall in the grand scheme of fragrances. I think this one is something that is one of those huggy fragrances but does feel quite summery still. I do still feel quite happy to wear this one. This is actually my scent of the day today. I like it because it's so gentle, but I also like it because it feels like a hug. I think if you like fragrances like Narciso Poudre, you might really like this fragrance, especially if you find Poudre too cloying or you want something slightly fresher feeling. This is essentially a creamy floral vanilla fragrance. So that's Kenzo Amour. So the next fragrance is one that was gifted, and this one was sent by Granado. So Granado are a brand that I have tried a lot of fragrances from, and I find that often they have some really nasty super ambers in the base of their fragrances, and that totally puts me off quite a lot of their range. This one does not have that. So this is a fragrance that I would describe as somewhat inspired by something like Blanche Bête. They're not the same, but they definitely have vibes of each other. This is a creamy, white feeling kind of fragrance. It does have loads of florals listed. It does feel solar, but it's really the white creaminess that comes across most of all. I get a phantom coconut in this fragrance. There's definitely something that smells like a very creamy feeling coconut. There's not coconut listed, I don't think. There's also something here that is incredibly musky, and there's also just a creamy kind of feeling vanilla tonka, and something as well that's quite powdery in the dry down. I think there must be cashmere in this fragrance too. But it's just got this really lovely overall creamy feel, perhaps some sandalwood here too. And I think that's really what shines through most. It's just one of those almost sun cream smelling fragrances. It's incredibly beachy feeling in a way. It just makes me think of sunshine and summer, and yeah, I featured this recently in my solar fragrances video. I really like this one, and I would recommend this from Granado's range. I'd also recommend Citrus Basilis, especially if you like Hermès Un Jardin de Montsouris, because I think they're similar. But yeah, I would also recommend this one, Madreperola. So that's Madreperola by Granado. So the next fragrance is one that I picked up because I heard the word reformulation, and that usually is enough to panic me into buying something that I've had my eye on for a long time. So this one is Dior's Addict, and this is the 2014 version of this fragrance. I think there's been a release in 2002 originally, and then 2012 reformulation, and this is the second reformulation that we know about. You know, it's Dior, so I'm pretty sure there's probably been some secretive reformulations going on. So I've not seen any 2026 reformulation so far, but the rumours are there. So if you've heard anything about whether there is a new version of this fragrance coming out, Please do let me know, but I haven't seen anything so far, so maybe it was all just a rumour. But yeah, this I just think is such a striking fragrance, and I remember trying it years and years ago in store and really thinking it was something very different. And actually retrying it now, I'm still struck by how much I enjoy this one. So the opening is not the friendliest. The opening has a little bit of a green aspect. It's slightly bitter feeling a little bit. It's got a citrusy aspect to it. The dry down though is just the most creamy, beautiful vanilla. And it's something that definitely is like a strong vanilla. It's something that isn't a gourmand vanilla. It's more of a savoury vanilla. But there's something here as well that makes me think almost of nutmeg. There's something warm, slightly spiced, maybe even a little bit smoky in the dry down. Perhaps some sandalwood. There's something very, very creamy and woody feeling as this dries down. But it's really the vanilla that's the star. And I think the vanilla is so unusual in being not overly sweet in this fragrance. And that's why I really enjoy this one. This is something that you can imagine someone who means business wearing. And I've not worn this too many times so far because I kind of bought it towards the end of when the cold season was. But it did turn cold again back in May. And I did pick this one up and wear it a few times sneakily. But I'm really looking forward to it getting to the cold weather again in the winter so I can wear this one a bit more. I just think this is such an iconic fragrance. So that's Dior's Addict. So the next fragrance was gifted to me by the Experimental Perfume Club, and they asked me to choose one from their range. And obviously I'd not tried any of their fragrances at the time they made me choose, and that always makes me nervous. But I actually lucked out with this one because I chose Tonka Extraordinaire. And if you've seen my sampling video of this brand, there were so many of this brand that I didn't particularly enjoy, but this was actually one of the ones that I really did enjoy. And I would say, actually, if you try fragrances from that brand, definitely concentrate on the nutty ones if you do like nutty fragrances, because they do these nutty ones really, really well. So this is a sesame-based fragrance, but there is obviously also hazelnut, and there's also a touch of patchouli, not too much patchouli. There's also something here, again, I often smell phantom coconut in fragrances, and I smell it again here. There's something creamy, and I guess that's what's making me think of coconut, perhaps. The patchouli here is not overly chocolatey, it's not overly earthy, it's just a very subtle patchouli. Even if you hate patchouli, you might still really like this fragrance, I think. The dry down for me is just such a surprise because it transforms from something very nutty feeling and sort of sesame and hazelnut based into something that's more resinous, and I think that adds a lot of interest in the dry down. I love resins, I love the warmth, I love the richness of them. This one feels like a fragrance to wear at home when you're on the sofa. It's just sort of something you could wear and snuggle up to someone wearing. It makes you smell delicious, but in a kind of non-sweet way. It's almost a savoury feeling gourmand. I'd describe this as sort of a sister of something like Oh La La by Thierry Carbonell. It's definitely in that kind of realm, but I think this one is perhaps the more delicious fragrance of the two. So that one is Tonka Extraordinaire by Experimental Perfume Club. So in April, I was sent some fragrances from Giorgio Armani, and they were launching 2 new flankers for the C line. And the first of these is Nude Bloom. So out of the 2 flankers they sent me, this was definitely my favourite. And this is really something that is very similar to the original EDP, but it's lighter, brighter, more summery, much more uplifting and airier than the original EDP. So this has a blackcurrant in it that smells almost like it's behind frosted glass, or it's made into a pastel. It's something that smells almost like a boiled sweet version of blackcurrant, but it still does have a slight tartness to it. It's also got a bit of sparkle from some citrus, and the rose is very fresh and sweet. I think this fragrance just smells airy. It's less heavy really than the original. The patchouli is much lighter. There's still the vanilla. It still does have that chypre feel, but in that sense that it's not an old school chypre, it's more of a modern one. It's sweeter and it doesn't have that extreme bite from something like oak moss. It's much more gentle than that. I'd really recommend this one. I've had a lot of compliments wearing this one, and that's really surprised me. And also this one really lasts long into the day. I don't think this is like groundbreaking, but it is just a generally likeable fragrance, and it's something that it surprised me when I've got the compliments, because it's been 6-7 hours after I've sprayed it on. It's not been, first thing in the morning. It's been into the afternoon when people have noticed this on me, and they just say, oh, you smell nice. It just is the archetypal you smell nice kind of fragrance. So that's Sì Nude Bloom. The second flanker fragrance is one from the Sì Passione line, and this one is Red Bloom. So this had me at hello with the initial opening of this, because it's a raspberry, rose and iris opening. It smells like French Kiss from Glamour when it opens. It's the most distinctive kind of lipsticky feel to me, a sweet powdery lipstick. But that sadly doesn't last, and the dry down is far less interesting. So it transitions into something that eventually smells mostly of cashmere. So it's that dense kind of powderiness, and there's also a bit of a woodiness here. So I think there's some amberwood, and it's not too much to me, the amberwood. Sometimes amberwood I can find immensely off-putting. I don't strongly dislike this fragrance, but there's something about this that just isn't me. But the opening was stunning, and I was really disappointed when that opening kind of dissipated and it just changed quite significantly. This one on me does not have the lasting power of Nude Bloom, which I think also influences my thoughts on it. It just isn't as much me, but I think this one probably out of the two is going to be the more popular fragrance, because that opening is just so wow. But definitely if you try this one in store, it's one to wander around wearing, not to buy straight away, because the dry down is very different to how it opens. Also, if you don't like blackcurrant, I don't sense blackcurrant at all in this fragrance. That's Sì Passione Red Bloom. So the next fragrance is a purchase, and this is one that I've been looking for probably about a couple of months before I actually found a bottle at a reasonable price. This one's discontinued, and I've been looking for it because I was just feeling a bit of a fit of nostalgia over it. I remember trying this when it first came out and just not being that impressed by it. But when I thought about how it smelled and looked back at perhaps how I felt about it, I thought, do you know what, I bet I would appreciate that fragrance now and I would really love it. And I do actually really think this one stands out as very different. So this one is Gucci Memoir du Nodeur. So this fragrance to me smells more like a niche fragrance than a designer fragrance. This is something that I wouldn't expect to smell from the Gucci designer range now. I would expect this one to be in their garden range, in the higher price line. It's something that really stands out because of the chamomile. The chamomile gives this a yellowy green feel, and the bitter almond here gives this a slight creamy feel, but also sets off the bitterness of the chamomile. Chamomile is a bit of a duality between something slightly honeyed and something greener and more sour feeling or bitter feeling. And I think that's perfectly played out here. There's also just this kind of creamy feeling almond and musk, and the musk actually turns quite soapy in the dry down. It's soapy, clean, but also quite creamy and quite green, and also with that bitterness. There's a lot going on here, and really this is something that I just haven't smelt elsewhere in the designer world. I think maybe this fragrance would fit in nicely with the Prada line, perhaps the Infusions line. I could imagine one called Infusion de Chamomile or something like that. And I think this would fit in nicely there, but I just think this one is perhaps just not sweet enough for today's designer market. It just wouldn't, I don't think this one would sell. So I've been wearing this one to work. I just think it's very easygoing, clean, and just interesting. I've just been really enjoying this one. It's very spring, summer appropriate. So that's Gucci Memoir du Nodeur. So the final fragrance is one that I received in PR, and I'd never heard of this brand before. So this is from L'Objet Parfums, which is a Portuguese homeware brand that is sold in places such as Harrods and various other places around the world. And I was intrigued to smell this because I just hadn't tried anything from this brand or heard of this brand before. So this is really a dark rose geranium tea fragrance. It's got a lovely kind of dry, spicy aspect to it, and it also has a slight Middle Eastern feel to me as well. I think this one for me is a bit too heavy on geranium for something that would appeal to me, but it has made me interested in trying the rest of the fragrance from L'Objet Parfums. It's very, very almost me, this one. It's got a lovely kind of deep, dark rose, but it's just the geranium that puts me off. I find geranium really difficult in fragrances, especially when it's prominent. It adds a greenness, it adds a slight furriness, and it also adds an earthy spiciness, and I get all of that in this fragrance. To me, there's a midpoint in this fragrance where the rose begins to dominate the geranium, and that's my favourite bit of this fragrance. But by the dry down, the geranium is back. It's back with a vengeance, and that just isn't me. I think this one would actually smell really good on a man. I think this is perhaps just not quite me because of the geranium, but I think I would love to smell this on somebody else. So that is Rose Noir by L'Objet Parfum. So that's the final fragrance in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, then please do press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know which fragrances have captured your hearts in the last 6 months. Is there one particular purchase that you'd been looking forward to, that was your one true love, that you'd had your eye on for a long, long time? Or is there one particular fragrance that you just fell head over heels in love with and had to have straight away? I'd love to know which have been your favourite pickups over the last 6 months. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.